Good morning and welcome. I'd like to thank everyone for joining today's episode of Broadcast to Post. I'm your host, Jeff Sengpiel, Chief Technologist here at Keycode Media. When we all think of the state of post-production in 2021, the words, "it's complicated," come to mind. Maybe even a little awkward. No two companies or production are doing workflow exactly the same way. Some have their editors and producers working completely remote. Others have everyone in the office quarantined to individual edit bays. Some have clients visiting in person, while others won't let anyone enter the building until 2022, whether client or creative staff. Yep, it's complicated. I'll be joined shortly by some of the top post-production engineers today to address this complicated state that we're in and share real stories, real examples of how post-production operations are addressing the challenges faced by staff, management, and most importantly, the end customer. Our panel spends every day solving these business and workflow challenges for companies just like yours. Today, we're going to focus on the essential parts of the post-production process: ingest and distribution, creative edit, finishing, management, review and approval throughout, and delivery and archive from a 2021 perspective. The panel today, along with you, are going to hit these key discussions industry teams are having. What part of the post-production process do you still keep on premises? What part of the post-production process do you put up in the cloud? Where is actually everyone going to sit? And while our panel of experts today are going to discuss this in depth, I'm going to give you a little bit of a spoiler. The answer is, it depends. It's going to be coming down to what is important to your production, to your process, and most importantly, to the person who writes the checks, whether that's you, a major production company, your boss, or your clients. But to decide the best thing for you, you have to get educated. So, why is Keycode Media dropping this post-production knowledge on you today? Well, Keycode Media has been the preferred U.S. reseller and integrator for the post-production industry for the last 20 years. Our nationwide team of engineers are experienced in helping companies design, install, upgrade, and maintain the technology necessary to operate a well-oiled machine. A post-production operation that just works, so your team can focus on the creative. Well, we handle things like shared storage, edit suites, color suites, audio suites, and asset management equipment, whether that's hosted on-prem or in the cloud. Before we get started, we want to give a shout out to our partners that are assisting with this discussion: Adobe, Avid, and LucidLink. Keycode Media is the go-to resource. Can't thank them enough for their support. So we're going to take a little quick commercial break, and then we'll return with our panel.
Nexis is such a huge part of our success because the efficiencies and the speed and the flexibility, that's just a massive game changer and continues, I think, to be a competitive advantage.
The world is rapidly changing. Now, in addition to working together in an on-premises production environment, cloud-enabled workflows and remote collaboration are becoming more essential to keep your business operational and relevant. Demand for content continues to skyrocket, as does viewer consumption across multiple screens, and your media storage must adapt to your new requirements. Whether you're creating content for feature films, TV, online, or broadcast news, your team needs the ability to work collaboratively, regardless of their location, to deliver it fast. Avid Nexis leads the media industry with the most comprehensive solution for tiered media storage, on premises, and all the way to the cloud. You can enable hundreds of editors, assistants, journalists, producers, and other contributors to work together in real time using Avid Nexis, integrated seamlessly with Avid Media Composer, Editorial Management, and Media Central. Expand your workflows on Avid Nexis with other creative tools from companies including Adobe, Apple, Autodesk, Blackmagic Design, and others. Optimized to accelerate collaboration for high-quality production, teams can produce content faster and your business can achieve better efficiency and security across Flash, online, nearline, and cloud storage tiers. And using Avid patented technology, you can quickly tailor and tune workspace capacity performance, and drive protection to meet the latest challenges without disruption or downtime to the creative process. Avid Nexis. It's the media industry's most trusted storage solution.
From the very beginning, we wanted to work with Adobe's Creative Cloud. We knew we need something as flexible as Adobe Premiere. Making great products like this series would take plan of mics and men.
The fact that Premiere allows you to work with so many formats cuts down everything for this project by about half.
We really needed to have a program that could adapt to the constant changes. There was no doubt in my mind that Adobe Premiere was the right choice.
We never knew that we were going to finish Mank Remote, and we did. And Productions allowed that to be more streamlined.
Everything's just become much faster and much simpler. That I think they've really perfected.
What I like about Premiere Pro is it just feels very intuitive for me. Like everything's right where I need it.
Having a tool like Premiere allows me to very easily navigate through the edit.
I'm a Premiere Pro enthusiast. I can just like shut off my left brain and just it does what I want it to do. Editing is like playing with the world's greatest video game.
I think it's a benefit with Premiere Pro that you have the entire Creative Cloud at your disposal.
Having the editor cut a scene and then be able to dynamically link it to the animator or designer and then be able to refresh that dynamic link. I gotta say, Adobe Premiere handled it very well.
There were so many different sequences, there were so many different ideas of what the film could be. It was great to work on Premiere where I could take my computer around. I literally would sometimes edit out of a coffee shop on my laptop.
We edited a large portion of the film in 2 different places, screen sharing my Premiere project file.
The way I get in and out of the project very fast. I'm able to keep things organized the way I like it. All I have to do is figure out how to stitch these puzzle pieces together.
If you have all of these tools, all you need then is just your story and your voice.
Everyone wants to be able to have tools to make their films come to life. Adobe just makes it so much easier.
All right, big thanks again to our sponsors for making this episode possible today. Now, let's introduce the panel for our exciting topic, post-production workflow in 2021, hybrid teams and management. In alphabetical order, Ed Locke. Ed's got over 20 years of experience in IT and entertainment technology, working for companies like Prudential, the Walt Disney Company, and Avid Technology. Ed participated in the migration of TV stations from linear to digital operations, traveling to dozens of stations throughout the country, deploying, training, and providing on-air support for new digital infrastructures. Recently, he's designed and continues to manage multi-million-dollar solutions for companies such as Trinity Broadcasting Network, Fuse TV, and KCRW. Dan Wagner, he's our senior solutions architect. He brings 30 years of experience working in all aspects of video production. He's been specific to post-production. Dan is an Avid ACSR and ACI. He's considered to be one of the most knowledgeable solution providers in post-production system design. Dan also leads all aspects of training for Keycode Media's post-production clients, providing customers tips and tricks and accelerating staff technology adoption. Tom Faber, he's also a solutions architect for Keycode Media, located out of Chicago. He specializes in storage, asset management, and archive. Armed with a screwdriver, a spool of cable, and his laptop, Tom travels nationwide installing and training on many of the solutions that Keycode Media specializes in. And myself. I come to Keycode with extensive knowledge in the world of episodic television and feature film post-production and finishing. My credits include engineering oversight on shows like Madam Secretary, Star Trek, Glow, Game of Thrones, and features like Christmas Chronicles, I Feel Pretty, and Hotel Artemis. Plus, all the fun work in reality and post for live workflows like American Idol and the Oscars. All right, so let's start off with some more general questions before we get into the nitty-gritty. Some post-production managers are looking for affordable and secure ways of having teams operate seamlessly in the office and at home, hybrid workflow or work from anywhere. Others are trying to figure out the safest way to get people back to editing in the office, while a few are all in, closing the office off and trying to have the entire team work remote. So what types of conversations are you having with customers, and ultimately, what are the final solutions you're seeing getting deployed? Dan, let's start with you on that.
Okay. Well, the conversations we're having with folks really centers around the HP RGS or Z Central application, because many of our sites are interplay based and things like that. So they're production management based. And so therefore they already have HP computer workstations as their editing workstations. So couple that whole system, just make sure you have a good VPN, and it's pretty affordable for businesses or companies to have their editorial staff remote in and start doing their job, start cutting. And yeah, so that's the biggest conversation we're having. I will say that we also are dependent on that connection, that internet connection from the editor's home to the office, up to that VPN there. If that connection, that's a connection that we need to make sure is solid in order to have the best experience for them.
That's one of the things I've been running into as well. I'll be talking to clients, in an area. One of the things that in the LA area, when I mentioned certain internet service providers and how I've had difficulty with my own, they're like, "Oh yeah, I've got problems with them too." So that's one of the things. We're not the only ones who went remote and are trying to control things. Ed, Tom, what conversations are you seeing out there?
I'm kind of seeing it along the same idea where we're more of a hybrid solution here in the Midwest area. Couple days from the office, couple days from home. So usually someone's always kind of at the office doing that media management no matter what. So with social distancing and all that sort of stuff, someone's there to manage that. But most of the time it is using, like Dan alluded to, HP RGS, being able to be in front of the machine physically or remotely definitely helps in that case there.
Yeah, and I would say what I've run into pretty commonly lately is using some sort of asset management system to actually produce a streaming editable proxy, and actually just editing using regular editing systems at home, and then just leveraging that proxy to get access to the media that they need.
Well, and one of the conversations that actually is coming back to the table these days is Mac remote. A year and a half ago, we were having conversations with people where it would begin with, "Well, we've got to convert you to PC to make this work right." And the answer was no, we're not. We would rather fight than switch. And then 3 weeks later, they're calling saying, "Yeah, let's do this. We kind of need to continue to produce content." But Mac solutions have come a long way. Jump Desktop's out there, and there's some other things that have come to the party. So one thing to point out about hybrid. So we've talked about hybrid in terms of some people in the office, some people out of the office. The other hybrid piece that's out there is some people on-prem and some people editing in the cloud. So there's two different hybrid things going on there. So just to be clear on that. So let's get through the process. The beginning of the post-production process is ingest. So getting data in and then getting it distributed to folks who may be at home or may be on-prem. A lot of times there's TV shows with fast turnarounds, marketing departments that need to start editing promo as the shoot's going on. Ingest workflows have evolved over the years. What do you see they're going to end up as new camera to cloud and proxy now, full res later workflows have developed? Ed, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, and there's no like one answer that applies to everyone. These really are very detailed conversations with each individual client. A few examples come to mind. We were working with a large Christian broadcaster, and they're out recording remotely in the field, high resolution, sometimes multi-camera shoots. And they don't have the infrastructure in place, and it would be very costly to build all of the file acceleration and all of that to actually try and get these files from a remote location. So they are still, finding a way to get that media to one of their offices around the country, get that ingested, and then have proxies created that allow pretty quick access to it for, things like, review and approval, and just producers to be able to go in and see what was shot and things like that. And similarly, we've got a corporate client out on the East Coast that they have 3 primary locations, and it did make sense for them to leave a certain storage footprint on premises and do their high resolution recording and get that basically there. And on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, we've got an ed tech company that we've been working with that, we look for silver linings when all of the chaos of something like COVID happens. And, what worked out for them is they got out of shooting these videos in studios and started to just do them over Zoom and webcams. And that created a much, lighter footprint as far as the media files were concerned. And they're a global company that were previously isolated to editing on the East Coast in the United States, and they really wanted to distribute that. So we were able to take that entire workflow and spin that up in the cloud to where they're actually going into AWS tools to see the content that they've got, download that directly to S3 storage that's abstracted through File and Storage Gateway, and streaming proxies created from there. Anyone, anywhere in the world can edit with the same exact experience from anyone else. So we are seeing a variety of workflows, and it really depends on the intricacies of the exact workflow to determine, which variant of that is going to work best.
I always love it when production comes along and says, we're going to fix it in production. We won't fix it in post anymore. It's just the best thing ever. Tom, any experiences you've had with the ingest workflow?
Yeah, definitely kind of what Ed alluded to is sometimes, depending on how much footage you have to bring up, is it a full-on production shoot where you're going to have terabytes of data, or is it just a little, talking head interview or a little quick shoot? Big thing is we're seeing VPNs, get a lot better. So you can VPN to your storage, upload a proxy, upload a high res. We are seeing a lot more third-party transcoding softwares in the mix. So files will automatically hit an ingest. The workflow is designed to archive that camera raw media, as well as create a proxy right off the bat. Or, like Ed said as well, having someone physically in the office. So a media manager that's always there, managing the hard drives that are coming in, coming out, creating those proxies, letting editors know, hey, these are good to use. So whether you're going to use something like Avid Editorial that's going to be using cloud-based, or you're going to go through like SNS and using Nomad and those proxies, whether those are the low-res view proxies or there are new edit proxies, which are ProRes now, you can have those options. So we're definitely seeing that hybrid option. It really depends on how much footage is coming in, and that's why you leverage a system integrator like Keycode Media, so we can sit down, look at your workflow, and give you the best options that are out there.
And folks keep coming up with new options. I mean, our friends at Adobe just acquired Frame.io, and they had just come out with their camera to cloud workflow, getting low-res proxies there quickly, and then later, as you've been able to get the high-res media in place, replace them in the background, and then create viewing proxies. So that quick turnaround stuff. Dan, any thoughts on this one?
What I have actually seen that we've been using with one of our clients for quite a while now with Frame.io is they have an organization or a production company out on the East Coast that is conducting the Zoom type meeting and recording all of the ISO feeds and things like that. They are uploading the original footage to Frame.io, and then there's a media manager back in California that would grab that content and drop it on local storage, and then it goes through Content Agent and gets checked into the asset management we've got there, and should be archived right up there at the front in case of disaster recovery, or somebody doesn't have access to the frame, whatever connectivity issues and things like that might arise. You at least have a separate repository of that information or of that footage there on premises at a facility that is operated by the client.
Very cool. So getting on to the next part, shared storage and management. First of all, where is this today? There are options that didn't exist before, like all the data, you put it up in the cloud and then you deliver it via LucidLink to Adobe or Avid editors, wherever they are, streaming from the cloud, to old school SneakerNet. There's the daunting task of making sense of all of these assets and organizing it for edit teams, and then making the media and files easy to use. How has hybrid or cloud impacted storage and managing of files? And as organizations grow, is the media storage and management an evolution or a revolution? I'll take point on this one. We've got a client here in LA. They have an on-prem storage system. It is actually an Avid Nexis. And then they're pushing to, they started by pushing to cloud and then distributing media out to Editorial, and then keeping the on-prem Nexus and then the cloud as the source of truth. Now that was a Storage DNA shared workspaces, Fabric shared workspaces in Storage DNA workflow. The other thing that has come online lately is LucidLink, and being able to put your data into the cloud bucket and being able to stream it with some caching locally, and having the edit system realize or think that everything is local, and that's been that's kind of a game changer there, because a lot of folks have also come out with shared storage in the cloud. So they're taking a file system, whether it's say our friends from Editorial or from Avid, and they're putting that file system on top of a high performance cloud instance of storage, and then presenting it with the same interface that everybody's come to know and understand, and then letting folks work attached to that. Usually those are closed ecosystems, and there's been some angst over how quickly we can get things in and out of those, or mainly into those cloud buckets, and folks have been working on trying to improve that around. So the management of all that, figuring out where everything is, that's been one of the core challenges, I think. Some of the storage folks like Storage DNA will definitely do that with Fabric. SNS can do it with being exposed to buckets and knowing where everything is. That's one of the keys of knowing where everything is, what the cost of that storage is for you, whether it's what's the cost of your spinning disks that are in the room over there, or what's the cost of it sitting in the cloud, and the cost to pull that out. That's one of the key things, basically identifying it, and that also speaks to archive, because we'll get to that later at the end, where some people think it belongs. But it's one of those pieces where knowing what you've got at archive, and your security of your media in terms of redundant copies and following that, as the archive companies say, the 3-2-1 setup. Ed, any thoughts on shared storage and management of it?
Yeah, well, I mean, at least in the world where I live, I view this much more as an evolution rather than a revolution. I mean, for decades now, I've been a big proponent of using some kind of automation systems to help, optimize your workflow and really allow you to embrace a lot of the newer technologies. And I think the cloud platforms that are available today, and we're seeing more and more prevalent, integrate very nicely into that. I mean, it used to be a simple world. You had a SAN, you sized the SAN for how much media it needed. maybe you put an LTO on the back end. And that even got complicated even before we had the big push to go to the cloud. And you've got, just speaking on AWS, you've got S3, you've got Glacier, you've got, the block storage that's there. And oftentimes there still is an on-prem LTO because that can be and often is the least expensive way to keep that ever-growing repository of media. And in addition to that, when you're in the cloud, you want to integrate oftentimes with transcoding solutions, artificial intelligence services, and things like that. So in my mind, it is really just expanding that world of, building some intelligence into your workflow, adding these asset management and automation tools, and really allows you to more effectively leverage some of these tools. Jeff, you mentioned, ingress and egress charges and how to manage that by being able to build rules so that you are in complete control of what media exists on what tier of storage for how long and when. You can start to kind of take control of that as opposed to getting a surprise at the end of the month when you realize that you far exceeded what you had originally planned for your cloud costs. So definitely an evolution. I think it's a natural progression. The services that are up there in the cloud from a storage standpoint, they're very robust and integrate really well into that methodology.
And the other interesting thing about cloud services that you've got the storage there, you're paying for it. There's supplemental services that can be around that. If you're in one of the commercial cloud providers, facial recognition, translation, transcription, all those pieces are available. But then people also swing both ways. Some folks are concerned about the sovereignty of their data and the security of their data. Versus having it on-prem where they feel they've got a better grasp on it, and those are all conversations that we're having with clients today. Dan, Tom, any thoughts on this one?
I just think being able to track where this data is extremely important. Back in the day, everything would typically be on premises, but now you're having to manage it on premises, in a cloud storage somewhere, maybe on a half a dozen editors' workstations at home, and a hard drive that's probably in shipment between point A and point B. So having the right tools to be able to track and manage that are essential, as well as having a person to deal with that. A lot of times we're so focused on the hardware, the technology, but you still really need to have a person that's shepherding all of this information. And therefore, I think the role of the media manager is constantly evolving and expanding in its scope and, frankly, its importance.
Which makes sense, having a person in the organization who knows, or persons, because the thing I always say when I'm talking with clients is, if you've got one person who knows where everything is, if they get hit by a winning lotto ticket, all bets are off. And so you want to make sure that you've got at least, an institutional knowledge behind that as well. So getting into editing and finishing suites, getting to the creative side. So Mac versus PC, that's been an interesting change of late. There's been new things that have come to the table with remote access and chipsets, getting into reference monitors versus a remote control environment where you don't necessarily have that, setting up your edit and finish desk, maybe even in the back bedroom, not to mention, the network that was alluded to before, giving people that smooth editorial experience and low latency. What advice are we giving to people trying to design, edit, and color suites, and the facility behind it in today's day and age? Not to mention the other fact that sometimes the facility is a data colo. Tom, what are you seeing out there?
Like we've mentioned before, the HPRGS is a great solution that's out there. LucidLink is also, really great for getting video footage to remote editors, Mac or PC. But yeah, it's definitely, becoming an ever-changing solution, more or less. So, we're seeing, mostly Mac is still going to be LucidLink, some VPN connections, cloud editing, stuff like that, and that are there. But when you get down to the real nitty gritty of the finish suite, you know, it's, do you want to have an editor or a finish artist, a color artist taking home, you know, a $10, $15, $20,000 monitor to do HDR color correction? Or is that going to be, hey, guess what? You know, that finishing is going to be on site just because of insurance reasons, you know, putting that in the back of a car. A lot of insurance companies are going to say no to ship that out and stuff like that. So we're definitely seeing that. Otherwise, you know, we're seeing solutions like Streambox to do, you know, HDR 4K video, you know, over the internet that way is definitely helping. Going data colo, you know, it's mostly going to be that remote editorial, VPN connections, you know, making sure you have the correct networking. You know, your days of going just 10 gig out of your SAN solution up to your switch, when you're doing data colo with multiple editors, you're now talking to the point of 20, 50, 100 gig up out of the back of SANs to switches like that. So we're definitely seeing that sort of setup. We've obviously talked about a lot, the whole high res, low res proxy. So you can do a lot of remote editorial using proxies, using asset management solutions like that. So it's definitely out there. It's ever growing, but you know, we can make almost any solution work that may need to be done.
Exactly. And the one thing that's interesting about the LucidLink solution is the edit bay you had in the facility can be the edit bay you have at your home. You know, you can set it up with, you know, 5171 HDR monitoring, all that stuff, and then the media is just streamed down, which is a little different than having your edit system live in the cloud or live on-prem in your remote controlling it. So it's interesting to see where specific types of productions have wanted to go with that. A lot of the high-end, very high-end finishing things for theatrical, they set up locations on-prem, you know, in people's houses where they've got the entire, you know, scenario set up. And then they're shipping around iPad Pros, which have the ability to do like P3 color or HDR color and streaming out via Streambox. Ed, Dan, any other thoughts on the finish side of it?
Just that it's, you know, it's all fun and games until you get to that color critical phase of editorial. And it's, you know, it's either a fair amount of expense and logistics coordination in order to get that to still be done remotely, or it's, you know, finding some strategically located, you know, brick and mortar buildings where you can have, you know, people come in and do that work.
That's a discussion I've had with people too. Is, you know, they get to everyone went home and there's no one in the office, and the finisher said, well, how am I going to see my scopes? How am I going to go into the office? There's nobody there. You're the only one. So as long as janitorial empties the garbage cans, you're going to be pretty good.
Back in the day, though, back in the day, there was you know, that experience when you had a row of edit bays and one editor might pop into the edit bay to ask the other editor a question. You know, it's a very collaborative environment. Or a producer will stop in because they needed to quickly review a cut or something like that. But there was this communication component between everybody. And when you're not in the same physical space to communicate with each other, what do you use? And a lot of folks have adapted Teams and Zoom webinars, usually running on another computer off to the side. You don't want to have that type of system connectivity bogging down your editing machine. So that was a laptop or an old iMac or something sitting on that they dusted off and brought into the environment there. But it's important to have the team still be able to communicate. So yes, this is where all the Zooms and Teams and WebExes and all of those, all that technology comes together, and it's still used as a separate component, but it is a new component in edit bays I've seen pop up since the COVID hit.
And the other piece that's being used there is Slack. I've seen a lot of folks using Slack, or I hear a lot of folks using Slack, because you can hear the Slack chime go off when you're talking to people like, oh, you're a Slack organization, I know. So talking about the fun and games that Ed was alluding to before, that get to happen before finishing, creative editorial, We've got our friends from Avid and Adobe as sponsors of our event, and thanks to both of them. So let's start with the Avid workflows, and then we'll get to the Adobe workflows. What are the cool ways people are leveraging new Avid workflows? What are those moments in the customer discussion where Avid's going to be the best fit and there's an aha moment? Dan, let's start with you on that one.
I think a lot of it is that ability to really work well in a team environment still, and that where everybody went home, but we still need to all access the common media. We still need to share projects and things like that. And so the aha moment that I've been seeing is folks realizing that the workflow we're doing remotely is different, but it's not that different if we're able to harness the power of RGS, LucidLink, et cetera. The VPN access to literally driving the computer that, 18 months ago, the editor was physically sitting in front of. So that's kind of an aha moment. It's like, oh, we can do this. Okay, this is a good thing. We can get our show out the door and delivered. So, and also when it comes to the media management and review and approval process, I'm seeing folks start to take, at least in the Avid environment, they're taking, they're harnessing cloud UX and using that for some review and approval processes. Cloud UX is a browser-based look into your production management system. You can do some basic editing with it, string out, collecting clips, project organization, all without having to tie up a physical or virtual editing bay per se. So your loggers, your producers, even your camera department might throw a bunch of clips together and say, hey, check these out. This is what I'm thinking you might want to access or something like that. There's all sorts of, it's another tool that is allowing everybody to communicate and collaborate together. And it's based on a web browser. It's pretty, lightweight.
One of the other things also I've seen on some of the Avid workflows is talking to people about edit on demand. Now, we don't show people edit on demand. We tell them, okay, get your hands on it, play with it. And they come back to us and say, yeah, it's Media Composer. It's got shared storage. And that works out interestingly for folks that never owned the gear to begin with. They were, living in the rental world, and now they're in a world where they don't want a facility. And there's some interesting pieces there. So getting into the Adobe side, and then we'll open this up. Adobe has their full Creative Cloud suite. And you've got Adobe Productions for Premiere Pro, which lets you have that collaboration and the file locking. How's the family of products that are coming from Adobe changing the way teams edit? Are we seeing customers diving deep into maybe the new Sensei engine or Sensei engine, the AI piece for speech to text? Lots to go over. Tom, what do you think of where Adobe's at the moment?
Where they're at now is great. It's definitely been increasing. Doing that collaboration tools is huge. Letting these editors work, in cohesion with everybody else, kind of alleviates the ability to have to use, rely on VPN connections back to the home office. But again, you're really still limited to the internet connection from your house because you're going to be uploading and downloading that data. So it is obviously some newer technology out there with newer hardware out there, whether it's the HP systems that work out there, the M1 Max, or the new Mac Pros that are out there. It's definitely something to keep in mind that you might run into some hiccups every so often. So it still works great. We love it. But it's still, this technology is changing so quickly that it's tough to keep everything in line. So we're seeing those. We're seeing products like SNS Share Browser has file locking, so you can VPN back in and grab projects. Use that sort of thing with the Nomad workflow, using proxies remotely, and then save it back, and it automatically links to high res on site. So it's definitely there. Adding to what Dan was saying, with the cloud UX. We're seeing asset management, whether it's IPV or CatDV, same idea. Just quickly drop a video in. You can build some rough and tumble videos, whether it's the producer or the camera department saying, hey, this is what I was thinking of shooting. Here's a marker. You can export that, bring that right into Adobe as an XML. The edit's closely done for you. Then your editor's just doing the final touches, getting the dissolves and transitions correctly, dropping the video in or dropping audio in, matching cuts to audio. So it's definitely been growing as we see.
Cool. Any other thoughts on creative editorial before we move into review and approval?
No, I'll just say that as much of a proponent as I am of automation and asset management, I've been really impressed to see companies like Avid and Adobe really get, some core collaboration capabilities integrated without having to deploy a large comprehensive infrastructure around it. So it's nice to see that these big companies that take care of a lot of the editing in the industry really see that collaboration need in editorial and are making it simpler and simpler every day.
And we've heard some things in the grapevine that there's going to be some very interesting developments over the next couple months for everybody. The fun thing is that statement always applies. There's always going to be interesting things just over the horizon. But in terms of the infrastructure being extruded, that's going to be some interesting stuff. All right, let's get into review and approval. One of the biggest changes we've seen is process of having clients and other stakeholders involved with the approval process and reviews. Used to be you'd sit around and watch the color graded version or be in the session, or sometimes it was just simply a hyperlink and you got your private YouTube video and you watch that. So we're seeing all sorts of things from cheap and dirty to larger productions creating color accurate virtual meetings, and the whole over the shoulder concept, like some of the cloud providers like Bebop have out there. What are you folks seeing in terms of review and approval? There's a ton of tools out there, including the one we're on to have our chat here, Zoom and Vimeo. Tom, what are you seeing out there?
It's definitely been that review and approval hasn't really much changed in that remote review and approval tools have gotten better. Zoom, Vimeo, private YouTube links are still kind of there, but people want to have that live interaction of let's do it this way, let's do it that way. So we're seeing a lot of screen sharing using Zoom tool, Teams, stuff like that. We're getting down to asset management uploads. So you export a quick and dirty, send it up to asset management. You can throw markers, you can throw notes, all the way up to high end, Streambox. So one to many. So the editor's sitting there live. You could be in a Teams meeting, so you have 3 or 4 producers watching that Streambox on an iPad, on a computer, from the editor that's feeding the Streambox sender. So there's all the options for it.
Ed, thoughts on this part of the process?
Yeah, I mean, I think to Tom's point, remote review and approval has been going on for a long time, right? So it's still a lot of the same tools that are out there being used. We still have a lot of people using tools like Vimeo, private YouTube channels. I won't belabor the MAM point, but integrating logging inside of a MAM tool, we've seen that more tightly integrated communication is becoming more important, but a lot of the tools are the same as they've been for quite some time now.
Right, we've got a client that I'm working with that uses Frame.io quite a bit, have been for years, and it's still the same process. You're exporting out of your NLE, you're uploading the video and then sending links out to the stakeholders for that particular stage of the production or post-production process, and getting the feedback or getting that approval, and then able to move on to the next step.
Yes, and what we were talking about with Zoom, the integration gets a little more interesting. Both Avid and Adobe have the ability to output as an NDI feed, which can then go into a Zoom window. So while I'm seeing the 4 of us There could be a fifth, which is the output of a nonlinear editor, and it's playing, and we're all going back and forth in real time. And me as the editor, muting people so they can't get their opinions out, that sort of thing. So there's lots of interesting integrations that we're seeing out there. So let's get into archive. I want to talk a little bit about media management and archive. We can't ignore the glacier in the room. Where's the media going after the production's wrapped out? I mean, it used to be a long time ago. We put a bunch of LTOs in the box, and the box would go to the back of the vault, and sooner or later it would either someone would come get it or it would ship somewhere, and we just didn't pay attention to it. What are we seeing in terms of archive, gentlemen? And let's just toss it open.
I'm always been a big proponent of not waiting to the end of a project to start the quote archive. I see that really as if you just move those exact same steps to the ingest stage, so it comes in, gets checked into your system, and gets sent to LTO at that same time. That usually is a process that can be automated. That not only speeds up your archive at the end of the process, where all you have to do is whatever that delta, whatever the changed media, whatever that finished piece is, it's ready. There's a lot less that needs to be archived at the end. But it also gives you some disaster recovery. The credit card got turned off on the web services that are the website provider that you were sending all your media up to, or something like that, or you're temporarily disconnected and you still need to get something out. At least you have, especially if you've got automation built into this, at least you have the ability to reach in and grab the assets that are needed in what could be something less than ideal little time frame there when you have an emergency.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of clients that have had a long-term investment in on-premises LTO tapes, and still being the lowest cost way to archive that content, I don't see a mad rush to decommission those and put everything in what can be relatively expensive cloud. I mean, I've always said it comes down to this conversation and making sure we really understand active archive versus disaster recovery. So we are seeing more of a migration to say, hey, we're not going to put a redundant LTO system somewhere else in the country or the world. We're actually going to use something like Glacier as our long-term disaster recovery, where that can be put on a really inexpensive tier. But if you've got an active archive, if you've got large files, you're dealing with 4K, 8K media, and you need to recover that media in any type of regular basis, having a on-premises solution to do that, and unless you're just all in on the cloud, which, we have some clients that are doing that as well, but certainly not seeing the mad rush of people that have that investment in LTO to migrate that all to cloud.
Go ahead, Tom.
What we're kind of usually seeing, like Ed said, we're not seeing that secondary LTO somewhere else in the country. It's more of, we're going to push it to cloud, we're going to push it to LTO. And the only reason you're going to go to a cloud is when you have that insurance check, because it's going to cost a good ton of money to get that down. So the cloud is your DR for a big data set where they can ship you, the drive set, and you can copy it off, and you're not going to be taking, 2 to 3 weeks to restore that data off the LTO. Say you have to pull back hundreds of terabytes, that's going to obviously take a while with some of these 1 or 2 drive systems. So we're definitely seeing that side of things. We're still seeing on-prem LTO as one of the things. Archive on the beginning, like hits an ingest. We have automation that moves it to a working volume. Metadata is filled out. It gets sent to archive. It gets sent to cloud and gets moved to the edit prem, or the edit storage at that point.
And just so all three of us say this, archive at the beginning. We all agree, archive early.
Archive early, archive often, because the other thing we've had discussions with clients about is they call saying, oh my God, I'm getting hit with ransomware right now. Everything's locked up, or I had a disk fail. I've lost metadata. And we ask them, okay, you've got your backups, right? And their answer is, oh, we stopped doing that on X date. You can't shoot yourself in the foot. Archive, you can't ignore it, because it will that iceberg will always come back and sink your ship. All right, let's get into some of the audience questions we've gotten in. Can we talk about supply issues? What products are in stock? What's hard to get? What should I do if I have a large project soon? I've got lots of thoughts on that. I'll go last.
I can add some of this. So we're seeing networking gear. It's kind of hit or miss, stuff that we'll spec in when we first talk to a client, it's in stock, and then all of a sudden it's out of stock. Or we're seeing certain microphones that will be, hey, it's supposed to be in September, and then all of a sudden they gets pushed back to January, and then it's February, and now it's just no ETA. So seeing that, we're some gear is it's like I said, it's hit or miss. So we can get some B stock, some factory refurbished with warranties. It's definitely an option. So if you have a production that you need to hit, it might cost a little bit more to get it from somewhere that's a different reseller versus direct, or look at doing B stock or refurb is definitely an option.
So software usually that's delivered electronically, so we're not really seeing any issues there. And in fact, many of the software manufacturer, they're constantly developing and upgrading, and they're still on their normal cycles of updates that they've always had. One of the advantages to being in a cloud environment is you're not waiting for one of those 42 cargo ships that's sitting off the coast of Long Beach to pull in and unload and get products moving through the rest of the shipping channels, because they're in the cloud and you can turn that on a little faster. So that is something that I think you need to consider too. If you got a production happening soon, okay, are you going to be able to get the gear, the hardware you need? Or if you got to be really fast, maybe cloud is the right option for you.
Oh, we're definitely seeing that. To add to this, hard drives are obviously the larger capacity hard drives. 8 terabytes, hit or miss. 10 and 12, you're looking 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks sometimes. So though you want to get that 256 terabyte SAN solution in place, it might not be 16 or 32 drives anymore. It's going to have to be 48 or even greater. You have to go more disks at lower capacity just to hit that deadline. So does the cost go up? Usually, but a lot of our vendors are really great in kind of working with us, knowing that what's available, and we're getting ETAs ahead of time. So it's whatever you're looking for, come talk to us early. We can talk to the vendors, see what's available, and spec in the right gear for you.
Keyword being early, right, Tom?
Always.
Yeah, and
always.
That's the thing. If you've got a production coming up, you need to start these discussions now. I've been in a couple discussions over the last couple of days where people have said, "Oh, I'm going to go with a 200 terabyte stack," and the vendor will say that, and we deal with also some of the suppliers that supply our vendors, so we have an idea sometimes that there's problems before even our vendors know there's problems that are about to hit in their supply chains. So 10 terabyte drives, they're going to be back ordered forever. So we've been telling people, well, you don't want 200 terabytes, you want 280. Let's go with, the 16 terabyte drives as opposed to the 10. Or we can go with a smaller and possibly a larger footprint of spindles to get you there. The thing is, we've been doing the math on shared storage for years, and we know these discussions. We know, speed versus spindles versus the output of the chassis, and we can have these discussions. Switching, as everyone mentioned, that's a royal pain. The other thing also is, once all these boats get unloaded, the next thing that's coming in is everything for Christmas. So Christmas consumer stuff is going to be sitting there, and costs have gone up with a large number of things. One of our vendors was saying the other day that, like with the hard drive life cycle, you buy them, you use them, they die, you replace them at a lower cost. So that lower cost piece went away. Storage costs are going up. So we're seeing that kind of across the board. If you've got something that is storage related, you want to buy sooner rather than later. Switching, we can find alternatives for you. That's what we've been looking at. We just had an issue with an audio compressor. It's not available for like 6 months, and we're, well, we can source it on used from this other vendor, and we can get it in there for you, and then maybe replace it later with the real gear once it comes in. There's ways to get around these things, and we have actively have a department of people that are we're looking at fulfillment and procurement and all that fun sort of stuff. All right, so Barry has a question. I'd like to find a solution to archive projects to the cloud which follow the project folder structure and not S3 object-based storage. What are your suggestions?
I mean, there's a way to abstract S3 storage and have it appear just as a drive letter, and you can interact with it exactly the same way as you would any other storage. So that's probably the quickest and simplest way. Just use file and storage gateway and mount it as a drive letter.
Yep. S3 storage is a type of storage. It's not a structure of storage. From that viewpoint, it is possible to use any file and folder structure you would like. I backed up my own personal stuff at home to a Wasabi cloud. It's the same structure I had before. Melissa, what would be a solid internet connection at home and the facility for a mid-size video team? So she didn't say how big mid-size is, but let's figure 20 people.
I would say at the facility, no less than, a gig, hopefully, because, the big question is are you going to be trying to stream proxies? Are you going to be ingesting high res remotely? That sort of stuff. There's so many questions that fall in place. So I'm seeing most facilities go gig. I have a couple here in the Chicago area that we're actually looking at putting 10 gig in. So, it's not just hey, let's upgrade to 10 gig. You have to replace the firewall. You have to replace switches. You have to do all of that sort of stuff. So it's, hey, we need more storage. Well, or, more speed. There's a lot of things that are moving underneath it. So I'd say, like I said, gig, if not better. At home, the download's not as much. Again, the big thing is the upload. It's being able to talk back. It's pushing files too. So we're seeing more and more fiber to home, for that equal bidirectional speed is definitely helping. But, I prefer to have somewhere 50 to 100 meg up if we can to be able to send big files up. But if you're just trying to do editing, I've seen, products like LucidLink and whatnot will do low res proxy streaming, and 50, 100 down is totally fine. I think RGS is 10 or 15 down.
I always use the 25 figure just to 25. Be safe. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a tough question to answer directly without knowing more workflow behind it. So essentially the most you can afford.
Exactly. And the important part there is just because you've turned up your internet speed doesn't mean you've put a bigger engine in there, but if you got a little tiny transmission in terms of your firewall, you've got a problem. Because one of the things is people say, well, I've got a 10 gig port on my firewall and I've got a 10 gig connection on it, but there's something called stateful packet inspection, which is called, basically looks through everything on a packet to see, is there a threat? And if you're looking at every packet, that takes time, that takes processing power, and you don't necessarily want that to be getting in the way when you are trying to run a remote control stream. So a better firewall that has a lot of processing power and therefore doesn't have latency is going to be good. When everything went crazy last year, we lit up 15 edit bays in this facility here, and they were being remote controlled. Our firewall was not adequate to the task. So we had to order a new firewall and then come up with some interesting solutions in the meantime to make that happen. But the connectivity wasn't the problem. It was the firewall. Just wouldn't work through it. And then, 25 megs for your home for an RGS type connection. And then a facility, 25 megs per client through the VPN. And then if you're feeding video out via, say, Streambox or other methods, then you have to start adding that on. We can sit down and do the math with you here at KeyCode to figure out, okay, what do you need? What do you need at home? What have we run into in terms of people calling us saying, oh my gosh, my internet is horrible. What do I want to do? We've been, over the last 2 years, we've been down a lot of these particular roads. Any other thoughts on that? All right, let's get into, Paul has got a question. What digital asset management systems do you recommend? Ed, I'll let you jump on that one.
I mean, it's always a dialogue, and we usually like to have each client do a deep dive into 2 or 3 and make the decision. I have a love-hate relationship with digital asset management systems. You know, no one does everything that I want it to do, but they all have their strengths. And the key is finding the one that has the strengths that best align with your key priorities and what you need to do. So I will stop short of calling out a specific MAM name on this call, but I will say it's a conversation I love to have, and please do engage us, and we're happy to walk that path with you.
Definitely. Also, the other thing we've learned from our experience is if you deploy a digital asset management system, if you don't tell it to do something, it's just going to sit there. There are services and processes that need to be put in. You need to determine what you want this thing to do, and let's get it configured with the right services and training and processes to make it be effective for what your organization needs. So there's the what's it going to be, and then how are you actually going to use it discussions that we can help you on.
And also to make sure. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Adding in that usually there will have to be a system administrator of that asset management system. Dan had the same idea, you know, checking for errors in file transfers, checking for automation, you know, file copy issues or archive issues. You know, even though it's automated, it is a machine. It will do 99.9% of things correctly, but you are going to have that one-off thing. So you're going to need some sort of asset manager to put the media in the folder the correct way so the automations work correctly, so they don't just sit there waiting to do something because a metadata field isn't filled out, or, you know, changing tapes in an LTO library because you're want to restore something from 10 years down, you know, 10 years ago. So knowing that I'm putting automation in to try to, you know, lower my overhead cost, you're still going to have someone that's going to be, you know, managing that system overall.
And I want to add to that there are critical stages in any automated workflow that you really need to interject human interaction with it. You know, verifying that file names are meeting the appropriate protocols and procedures that your organization has put in place. Hey, back in the edit bay, everybody's human. We're typing things up. You might have a misspelling. You got a word, you got a letter or two transposed, or numbers if you're trying to do things based on, you know, episode numbers and things like that. You know, episode 401 versus 410 are 2 completely different episodes in your storyline. So you don't want to get those mixed up. You need to have a human being verify that all that stuff is good as part of your everyday ongoing workflow.
Awesome. So Andy has a question. Latency issues with remote cloud solutions are still difficult on creatives. Is Keycode collaborating with anyone to find a solution more along the lines of a Resilio Mimic solution? The latency issue will continue to be a systemic infrastructure problem. So for those who don't know, Mimic is a software that allows non-Avid systems that are not connected to Avid shared storage environments to function like they are in an Avid storage environment. Resilio is file synchronization software. So are we collaborating with anybody? Yes. Storage DNAs, shared workspaces, Fabric shared workspaces, that's one of the ways. It's more geared toward media workflows than IT type workflows like Resilio is really designed to do. We can talk to you about that for Avid and for Adobe workflows. And we've got folks that are working on Mimic. And then, our sponsors, LucidLink, there's no latency there. So your files are delivered as they are needed. Your edit system is local, at your home. It's not remote controlling a system. So there are different ways to get around certain problems. And, it's like where I live, between where I live and Los Angeles itself is an area called Box Canyon, and it's got horrible internet. You're not going to be able to have a satisfactory remote control editorial experience there. We've got ways we can make that work for folks. Even if you're talking about synchronizing entire workspaces worth of media, overnight to get that set. Any other thoughts on that one?
Well, I mean, as far as latency is concerned, we have a client right now that had a need to edit in the States and in South Africa, and we stood up a streaming proxy editorial solution in the London EU region because it had the lowest latency to both the US and South Africa. And they've been cranking away on that for several months now, and the editors have not complained about latency with a pure streaming proxy editorial solution. So there's a lot of creative ways that we can look at trying to address that with the partnerships that we have.
Very cool. Question from Tony. Of all the remote solutions that Keycode has deployed, zCentral Remote, Teradici, Jump Desktop, what has been the most successful? Is one better than the other? To what extent have you seen these environments scale? How many editors and what cost? Dan, you want to take a stab at that first?
Truthfully, I've been seeing a lot of good luck and a lot of good performance with the HP system. The cost is affordable, and it seems to scale pretty good depending on your internet pipeline, both from the editor and coming into your facility. So that's my answer to that.
So my experience has been lately, Teradici was just acquired by HP, and they have a Mac client. The Mac client is not suited for prime time yet, in my opinion. And that's something that we're going to be talking about with different folks to see if they can help that. So that kind of leaves Jump Desktop on the Mac side. And that's the key there. The Jump is Mac centric, and it's designed to make that work. Folks have never come back saying, oh my gosh, this is the best editorial experience ever. However, it's allowed them to remote control Mac OS editing clients. zCentral has always been a stalwart for us, and that's worked out well. Even back to the days when it was called RGS, when it was just easier for us to say. It's been and the RGS piece has scaled greatly. There's a large cable network provider that's nearby us that has scads of RGS machines that are stacked up, all around town that they completely converted. So, they no longer have enough creative space in the building to bring everyone back in because they've hired people since all of this started. So not everyone will fit back into the sausage factory, as it were. So there's interesting pieces along that as well. And it's scaled rather well. And it's a question of working with the IT folks as well, making sure that the firewalls are there, because larger institutions, they have firewalls in place and they believe that they're going to be fine, but they're designed for folks who are just touching on spreadsheets and that sort of stuff. So we can definitely.
I just wanted to add to that, as far as the Mac and PC issue goes, it is possible with RGS to use a Macintosh computer to drive a PC back at the shop. So that opens up another round of options and capabilities to your configuration there.
Cool. Edit Dog is asking, where did Interplay Media Central Production Management go? The website seems to have been removed, and has it been rebranded again? Now,
all I know about rebranding is Interplay itself has been rebranded as Media Central Production Management. So look in that realm. And I'm sorry, I forgot the rest of the question.
I think that was it.
Hold on a second. I gotta wait for it to reappear. We clear questions off the sheet that are coming in.
Gotcha.
The website seems to have removed it. So I also do know that there's Media Central Newsroom Management as well. That's the news piece, and production management, and then there's asset management. So it's all Media Central, but there's just a different tag for what the individual different products used to be badged. All right, and James is asking, can you folks run through a good workflow for editing remote with proxies and then reconnecting full res? Do I need to have all the master files shipped to my studio, or should I have them reconnect on-prem and do the final exports?
You could do streaming proxy workflow, where everyone's just working in their home systems on the lightweight proxy. You could use something like RGS that's actually controlling the final conform machine that's directly attached to storage. And we also have clients with the high res in the cloud doing remote conform in the cloud.
Yep, there's more than one ways to defer that particular feline, or skin the cat, as it were. The other thing we've seen people doing is using Nomad from SNS. Tom's mentioned that a few times. What it does is it gives you the proxies and makes the system believe that they're still the same path as the original footage. So then when the project is brought back and connected to the original footage, whether that is a remote controlled finishing box, and we've set up a few of those for folks in this particular environment, or you've got someone coming in and bringing the project in, or the project's been sent back, and then you're just lighting it up, and then you're doing your conform at that point. That's the way that a lot of folks have been getting around with that on the Adobe side, and just using SNS's Nomad workflow. And then on the Avid side, I mean, generally folks are either using things like the multi-res if they're in a production asset kind of environment, or they're following the traditional workflows of let's pull the files and do a conform back to original camera master, or as what happens a lot here, the finishing actually goes from Avid and turns into possibly Resolve because it's going into a color grading workflow at that point, or Baselight. So turns into AAFs with attached media, and those workflows, those traditional workflows are still around and still cooking away. So we get to our last question from our old friend, Mark Rodanis. Do you have any knowledge of anybody using SpaceX's Starlink satellites for remote access?
Not I.
Not I.
Not
I don't know either.
William Shatner,
people, I've seen some people talk about speed of Starlight, being able to do that, but I've not seen any remote access, because I don't know of anybody up in the mountains that needs to edit while they're on PTO or something yet. So,
well, I mean, no one should edit on PTO. That's the whole thing.
Production will never stop.
Yeah, production will never stop unless you're doing it for fun. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us today and sharing some insight and dropping some knowledge. If folks, if you've got further questions, please, get a hold of us here at Keycode Media. We've got answers, and as you can tell, the answers are going to depend upon a bit of a discussion. There is no real stock way to do this. If there was, then everybody would be doing post-production. But you folks who are watching are special, and let's have a chat about what you need to do and what you need to do to go forward. And remember what we said, at the end of the year is coming up, and prices are going up, and availability is becoming more and more difficult. So if you've got a project you want to start looking at for post-production, please reach out. Sooner is better than later, as if you discover you've got a kickoff date, say in April, that could be tough on certain pieces of gear. So jump in early, jump in often, and thanks everybody for joining us today. Bye guys.